you for waiting.
Yeah, just for you. We might need you. I might have to call on you if you do that. We're gonna be looking at stuff that I don't know too much about.
Oh, help if I can.
Sex.
Sex. That's probably started more sex this morning.
What are you old guys smiling about?
Memories.
Okay, before this goes a little bit lower and down in the.
Better change.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is entitled Bearing Witness to Peace from Catholic Relief Services. Lord God, we come to you in our need. Create in us an awareness of the massive forces that threaten our world today. Give us a sense of urgency to activate the forces of goodness, of justice, of love, and of peace. Where there is armed conflict, let us stretch our arms to our brothers and sisters. Where there is abundance, let there be simple lifestyle and sharing. Where there is poverty, let there be dignified living and constant striving for just structures. Where there are wounds of division, let there be unity and wholeness. Help us to be committed to the building of your kingdom, not seeking to be cared for, but to care, not expecting to be served, but to place ourselves in the service of others, not aspiring to be materially secure, but to place our security in your love. Teach us your spirit. Only in loving imitation of you can we discover the healing springs of life that will bring new birth to our world through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, isn't that nice? It said it was through Catholic Relief Services, International Organization, and this particular prayer composed by the Catholic Filipino office. Kind of telling. So, moving right along, in the book of Leviticus, Moses laying down the law. I hope to be able to have us get through chapters 17, 18, and 19. When we left off last week, we were looking at 17 and looking at the concepts, the three main concepts that are part of Old Testament Hebrew anthropology, actually. The significance of flesh and blood and life, in human life. They're all tied together. And in verse 17, in chapter 17, verses 10 through 12, we read, and if anyone, whether in the house of Israel or aliens residing among them, partakes of any blood, I will set myself against that one who partakes of blood, and will cut him off from among his people. This is the important part, verse 11. Since the life of a living body is in its blood, I made you put it on the altar, so that atonement may thereby be made for your own lives. Because it is the blood, as the seed of life, that makes atonement. And that is why I've told the Israelites, no one among you, not even a resident alien, may partake of blood. So, now, we need, making, a significant point of looking at this passage particularly, because it ties in, it gives the beginning of the understanding of Christ shedding his blood on the cross for us as a sacrifice. For what? For atoning of sins. See the sources for that here in Leviticus Okay? And then, previously, in the previous chapters, we've seen, all kinds of sparing the blood and sacrificing the animals and so on, right? And we kind of scratched our heads, we kind of slipped over it after a while because it was the same pattern over and over again, draining the blood there's no indication they made blood sausage out of it. Around here in Appleton, you have to go to Jacob's Meat to get some good blood sausage.
Blueburst.
Yeah. Someone told me that they actually get it from Hain Meats. Because they actually do butchering at Hain Meats.
The blood.
Yeah, just the blood, yeah. Yeah. So, but for us to understand, maybe I'll get back to that. But if you go to Mass today, the first reading that's used at Mass today from 1 John chapter 5, he's going to be talking about that the relationship between Father and Son, God Father and God, and he's going to be saying is towards the end of John's letter, that three things testify to what he has said previously in 1 John. Three things testify to that: water, blood, and spirit. So he's taking what we find here in Leviticus, the understanding of life in the flesh comes through the blood, and the shedding of the blood is for atonement of sin. And he's taking it and as a basis, basically, and transferring it to the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. So listen carefully if you go to Mass today to that first reading. It's about halfway through. Or look it up yourself. First letter of John, chapter 5, verse 6 through 12, where he will say that. And here's like the biblical roots for that kind of understanding. And for us to realize the Old Testament or Hebrew meaning of a body is more holistic. We think we're doing science and biology, breaking down different parts of the body and so on. It's more holistic, their understanding. And it's only because of the influence of Greek later on in the history of Hebrew, just before Jesus, that they kind of zero in, and Catholic theology zero in more on the body and soul. Different Greek words for that, but Hebrew, they see life, Hebrew nefesh, flesh, bazar, and blood, dam, as the seed of life, and shedding of blood for atonement. So it's just kind of a review from last week. Chapter 18. This is all part of the Holiness Code, and we have to keep that in mind above all. This section deals with laws and that have an ideal code. Three points that you're going to start with as a background. Okay, these laws are ideal. Number two, they are not systematic. When we think of a code of law, remember we said Moses is laying down the law. Well, really it's God laying down the law through Moses, right? Okay. So, but this is not codified law. Usually is systematic, and these are laws that just they seem somewhat to be not connected. All right. They really don't. They flip sometimes from one item or issue or concept to another. The third main thing is directed mostly towards the male Israelites. Go figure. except in two areas. The areas of consanguinity and the area of affinity. Couple big words, yeah? Couple, you know what they are, right? All right?
No?
No. So, con, I gotta make sure I get it to spell it right for you, you know, what a great speller I am. Con, sanguinity. So that means you're related by blood. Relationship by blood. Okay? And then affinity. And affinity. So you're related by connection, like through in-laws. In-laws. All right? All right. And as we got to kind of keep this in mind as we look at this section. And a lot of these laws are dealing with sexual behavior. So marriage and casual intercourse is forbidden between men and women, specifically based on degrees of sanguinity or affinity. And if we take a look at the first 5 verses, chapter 18, it's a Bible study. We better read a little bit from the Bible. So, the Lord said to Moses, you know what, I said, we're looking at, Moses lays down the law, but it's really God laying down the law through Moses. And we're gonna see that phraseology as well as I am the Lord as kind of a punctuation part at the end of each section of these laws. So the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and tell them, I, the Lord, am your God. You shall not do as they do in the land of Egypt, where you once lived, nor shall you do as they do in the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you. Do not conform to their customs. My decrees you shall carry out, and my statutes you shall take care to follow. I, the Lord, am your God. Keep then my statutes and decrees, for the man who carries them out will find life through them. I am the Lord. Basically, this sounds like a preamble, actually. Preamble to... Pay attention now.
Thou shalt not take the Lord thy God.
Thou shalt not. Okay, amplification of the first commandment, huh? So I am the Lord. And then he gets right into it. Now, none of you shall approach a close relative to have sexual intercourse with her. I am the Lord. And then it goes through the next section, along the section. You shall not have intercourse with your mother, with your father's wife, with your sister, or a father's daughter, or a mother's daughter, or your son's daughter, or your daughter, or your father's sister, and that's, that's just a synopsis. There's like 15 of them. Interrelationships. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. Ancient marriages ordinarily were arranged by families, between the families. Number 2, the age for a girl to be married was 13. What's interesting in this section, I don't know if we're going to see it in another section, but what's interesting, you would think then, since this is a whole chapter on, sexuality, sexual intercourse, when and when not, and so on, you would think they would say something about a marriage ceremony. Nothing. Marriage ritual? Nothing. Marriage being blessed by the whole community? Nothing. And that's not a part of it at all. It may seem strange to us, right? Because for us, that we're still influenced by Greco-Roman culture and so on, in the development of our understanding of marriage as a sacrament. Even at the time of Jesus, there was a little more formalization and community understanding. Okay, right? So now, as we approach, for instance, this weekend's liturgies. This weekend we celebrate what?
Baptism.
Baptism of the Lord, which is the second Epiphany. And the third Epiphany is wedding feast of Karen. Karen always has it. So there's three Epiphanies of Jesus. You know, we celebrated last weekend the coming of the Magi, and you get away from the sharing of the gifts. What that indicates is it's a manifestation. Epiphany is a manifestation of God, who recognizes the divinity within him and the importance of Jesus. All the gifts that they brought would be tribute that those traveling caravans would bring to kings in order to appease them so that they could pass through their lands, basically, okay? So when they saw, reading the stars, the Magi, they figured, we gotta bring some good stuff, because we figured there's a newborn king of the Jews. So those are kingly gifts, all right? Later on, other meanings were given to those gifts, but they were like kingly gifts. So that's the manifestation, the light to the Gentiles. This child will be a light to the Gentiles later on when he's presented in the temple, and that's what someone's going to say, huh? Right? Prophetic word. The other manifestation then is the baptism, not when he was a child, but as an adult before he begins his public ministry, by John the Baptist. Lay down his interrelationship, because there's no indication really that, Jesus and Johnny, boy, they grew up together as cousins and they played with one another, right? Wrong! No. So that there wasn't that, family affinity between them. And even after, John the Baptist was arrested and he was in prison, he sends his disciples, remember this, right? He sends the disciples to Jesus and asks, are you the one that we're expecting or not? Or should we look for another? That's right, the Messiah. So there wasn't that connection, all right? So that manifestation, new manifestation at Jesus' baptism, when the skies open and John will say, I saw the Holy Spirit descend upon him as a dove. His understanding of Holy Spirit would have been connected with the dove as a positive, hopeful sign of God's favor. It goes back to the book of Genesis. What story in the book of Genesis does a dove present itself as a sign?
Hovered over the waters after Noah.
Okay. Noah and the ark, right? Well, these guys are so smart, and these gals are so smart here this morning. So that is the introduction of what's called a type. Not a model. Today we would say icon, but that's Eastern. But formerly in biblical studies, it's called a type, the beginning of a type. A feature that has layered meanings. And every time it shows up again in the scriptures, almost another layer of meaning is given to it. And so when John the Baptist said, I saw the Spirit descend upon him like a dove, the understanding of the dove would be connected with the beginning connection with the Noah and the ark story. Okay? So, and then, and then the third one will be the wedding feast at Cana, where seemingly Jesus says to his mom, why is your concern mine,
Yeah, never mind.
Yeah,
She knew.
but she knew. And we might see this in some of these laws later on, if we get that far. If I don't get distracted here this morning. Obeying and showing respect to your mother and father. So that's indicated in chapter 19 more. Okay, how did I get on that? I don't know. Okay. Roy.
Going back a couple of chapters, why is the cleanliness issue always a 7-day period for many of the issues? For a male with diseases or sores, women, the cleansing of a home or a house?
There's a couple different ways to explain that. Number one, because it gives the full time for purification so that there can be a new recreation. 7 days. Number two, it could be explained that the oasis in the desert during the Exodus were 7 days apart. 7 to 8 days to get to the sources of water. Okay? That could be another explanation. All right?
This is kind of an interesting,
Yeah.
You see this pattern.
Yeah, yeah. So, now, so after taking a look at that, then we have from 7 through 19, those verses. It will talk about a connection that this is a disgrace. The word disgrace is used, starting from verse 6. Now, none of you shall approach a close relative or sexual intercourse with her. Notice, that means that it's directed towards the men. These laws, men, you gotta control yourselves. I am the Lord. That's the next phrase. You shall not disgrace your father by having intercourse with your mother. And through this section from verse 17 through 19, the word disgrace is used 5 times. And the word in Hebrew means to uncover the nakedness of someone. That's why disgraced is used, to uncover the nakedness of someone. And that's why there's this prohibition over and over again. Now, from verse 19 through 23, there's a whole bunch of other prohibitions against your neighbor's wife, against minstrelling women, male on male sex, bestiality, perversions. And some people would say, well, it's not, take a look at verse 19. You shall not approach a woman to have intercourse with her while she is unclean from menstruation. You shall not have carnal relationships with your neighbor's wife, defiling yourself with her. The prophet should have pointed that out to King David. Huh? You shall not offer any of your offspring to be immolated to Moloch. So Moloch was one of the main gods of the Canaanites. So this is a law that came during a period, not of the Exodus period, but after they had settled in the land of Canaan. Emulated to Moloch, well, there's a footnote in the New American Bible to that. Emulated to Moloch, it's a reference to the Canaanite custom of sacrificing children to the god Moloch. The little victims were first slain and then cremated. So, outside of Jerusalem, southwest, there was the valley of Hinnom. It was earlier, before the Hebrews got there and settled and took over the city of Jerusalem, the Canaanites, Jebusites specifically, who had control over that area, worshiped Moloch. And in that valley to the southwest, that's where they dumped the children and cremated the children that they offered. In Jesus' day, in the first century, that valley was the garbage dump.
What was the name?
And so when Jesus makes condemnation and says, may it go into Gehenna, so Hinnom was the name of the valley, and Gehenna means the valley, basically the valley of Hinnom. And it had this layer of meaning behind it, okay? And it was the junkyard. And today we have, junkyards, but I remember as a kid, the closest junkyard was in Kakana. We used to take the junk down there, and fires were always burning there. Now they build $500,000 houses there. So,
Transformation.
yeah, transformation.
In James Mitchell's book, The Source, he really explains how they, it takes a long time to talk about how they.
Kind of like me, huh?
Yeah.
James Michener's The Source, have you ever read that?
About killing the babies and how they do it,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
So he has detailed. So, and if you read in the Acts of the Apostles, for instance, what really happened to Judas, in chapter 1, it'll give you a different explanation of the death of Judas Iscariot, and it is at that location of Gehenna, and it's kind of gross actually, but it's an indication of how they saw that particular valley. So here we find this mentioned first, and the emulation of that the Israelites must not do, and it's within this kind of context. So now, as we look at a few more passages, I'm not going to go through everyone. To modern readers, some of these laws seem antiquated, disconnected with, but others seem to have perfect common sense. But I want to point out to you that over and over again, at the beginning of these sections and at the end of the section, it has that I, the Lord, am your God. And that's like a signal. That's like in our ritual prayers we have added now in the new missal, through Christ our Lord. Okay? It's an indication. Go back. You must be holy as the Lord your God is holy. The opening of this chapter 9. So, all right. So it's a big, let's see, exhortation here.
Recalculate.
Recalculate. Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to decide how much more I want to tell you about What's interesting, I didn't count up how many laws they have about, there's probably 12 or 15 specific ones about not having sex with so-and-so, in relationship to, your family relations, consanguine or affinity, okay. But one thing they do not have is prohibition against going to prostitutes. It does not have a prohibition of going to prostitutes.
So that's okay.
Discovered at this point in his life.
For Jewish people. You can use or misuse those that are not part of the Hebrew circle, okay? But it got even the patriarchs in trouble. Jacob, Father Jacob,
Yes.
remember when we had the genealogy of Jesus? I hope the priest read it if you went to the Christmas Eve Mass and so on, and the whole genealogy. There's 5 women that were mentioned. Okay, so one of the first woman mentioned was Tamar. Tamar was Jacob's daughter-in-law. And she was childless. But she presented herself as a prostitute. And Jacob lay with her. She became pregnant with twins. And one of those twins, Perez, became the continuing link in the family history. You didn't catch that, did you? You got to go back and read that Jacob. It was no wonder God later on said, no laying with your daughter-in-law and all these affinity connections. But it's kind of interesting. For a prostitute, okay, well, go ahead, anything goes. If they're not a Hebrew, yes?
So did they marry? I mean, did they actually get married?
Yes.
Yeah, but their understanding of what constituted then marriage was different than us.
So how did they get married? If they didn't have.
How did they get married? Number one, an agreement was made based on understanding of covenant with God. So an agreement was made between the families, usually the heads of the families. But for instance, Joseph, who became the husband of Mary, if he was an older man or if he had been married before, which the Eastern Christians think, then he made the arrangements with the family. And by Jesus' time, in the first century, they actually signed a contract. Okay.
At Cana. At Cana, they had the.
Yeah, they had it, and then once that was signed, then it was up to the would-be groom, the expected, the betrothed, to prepare a house and home where he was going to live. And once that was prepared, then they would throw the party and ask everyone to come and you have a big thing going to the home of the bride's family, taking the bride and bringing to his own house. And then, party! Okay, wedding party. 3 to 7 days, Carol.
That's a lot of wine.
Well, until the wine ran out. And they did, so. Okay, let's take a look at 19, otherwise we get bogged down again. The Lord said to Moses, verse 1 of again, that same introduction. Speak to the whole Israelite community and tell them. You got to highlight this. Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. So it starts with be holy as the Lord your God. And I mean, this is part of why this whole section, chapter 17 through 20, is called the Holiness Code. And so these are a whole bunch of rules of conduct. And quite a few of these, they pick up on what we call the Ten Commandments, one or the other of the Ten Commandments. So the holiness theme is the basis of this whole code. All right? The reason why you should toe the line and, you know, observe these commandments. And then take a look, you know, what it starts off with. Revere your mother and your father and keep the Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. So, isn't it interesting that it starts with revere mother and father? What we call the fourth commandment, huh? And then after that it says what we call the third commandment, huh? So let's, actually, if we take a closer look at that, revere, what does that mean? And here's the Hebrew term, it basically means do not abandon mother and father. Do not abandon mother and father. Okay, what's the cultural background to that? Okay, they're wandering in the desert. They're pastoralists, all right? Going back to the patriarch. When they do move, they move all together. Pack up the tents, form up the flocks, right? Gather the children, put your knapsacks on, put on your backpacks, all go. And you start going. Well, who's going to be the slowest?
Kids.
And
Animals.
old people. Old people. And so this is, you know, based with that understanding. So it's really a message to adult children. Do revere the mother and father. Do not abandon the father and mother along the way, no matter how convenient it might be. In the book of Sirach, chapter 3, verse 12, it says, he who honors his father atones for sin. He stores up riches who reveres his mother. Okay, so the Old Testament, you know, prescription, going back from Leviticus, and then book of Sirach is 150 years before Christ. So it's like that wisdom is being said to reinforce this command from an earlier time period in Hebrew history into Jesus' time in first century, with this understanding. Do not abandon the elderly family members. Okay, I know growing up, you teach the kids, obey your father and mother. Otherwise, you're going to get it. Okay. So, but here, the words that are used really in Hebrew have this other meaning. You know, revere, respect. A lot of times, actually, you know, if it's translated into English as respect, it's less than, it seems almost less than revere. Okay, revering seems to have more connotation of ongoing care. Would you agree?
Yes.
Do not abandon them. Okay, so there, give you a little insight into, you know, this Bible stuff.
You can imagine when you're moving with 1,000 people through the desert.
Now, there's a number of social justice things in here, but also I want to point out, when Jesus is confronted by the scholar of the law, and it's found in the Synoptics, what are the greatest commandments? What's the greatest commandment? Which was a hot topic in the first century amongst the Jewish people, the Jewish priests and the rabbis and so on. And Jesus answers brilliantly, doesn't he, huh? Love the Lord your God. And what does he quote? He quotes from the book of Deuteronomy, the Shema, which is basically the Jewish creed. You shall love the Lord your God with your whole heart and soul and mind and strength, right? And he said, and by the way, also, your neighbor as yourself. Leviticus 19, take a look. 18. 19:18. And what's the context? So, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. But before that, verse 17, you shall not bear hatred for your brother in your heart. Though you may have to reprove your fellow man, do not incur sin against him. Take no revenge and cherish no grudge against your fellow countryman. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So, and then some smart aleck in the crowd says, well, who is my neighbor? Jesus should have said, well, look at the footnote in the New American Bible. Well, if you take a look at the footnote in the New American Bible, it says, although in the present context, the word neighbor is restricted to fellow countrymen, Jesus extends his meaning to embrace all, even enemies. And what parable does he use to show that? The Good Samaritan, very good. Yeah, in Luke chapter 10 and I think Mark chapter 5, the Good Samaritan parable is what Jesus uses then to show and to demonstrate who is the neighbor. It's far beyond what was here. And the book of Leviticus, which is just centered on their fellow countrymen. Extends that. I want to point that out too. There's several other social justice things. In this chapter, verses 9 and 10. And this shows that this was after they settled. There's sections in here, after they settled in the Holy Land, and these laws only make sense after they settled in the Holy Land. Because when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not be so thorough that you reap the field to its very edge, nor shall you glean the stray ears of grain. Likewise, you shall not pick your vineyard bare, nor gather up the grapes that have fallen. These things you shall leave for the poor and the alien. I, the Lord, am your God.
Book of Ruth there.
Huh?
I like the Book of Ruth where she just allowed to go and get the corners of the field. Forget I said that.
But right, Tom Schultz, isn't this kind of the thought with the start of St. Joe's Food Pantry?
He wasn't paying attention.
It was.
That whatever's left on the fields and so on, should be for the poor and for the alien in your midst.
Put the trailer on up a Walpack and go through the potato field after they got through.
The potato fields, and pick up the stray potatoes, huh? I discovered what being now up in Black Creek and, in the Navarino area, I discovered, what they do with all the stray cabbage? Cabbage that they couldn't pick off, and toss them. Well, they do have the cabbage truck, but not this year, because it was too wet. Huh? I was driving in the back roads around the place that's called Lehman. And I went past a farm. And they had a whole wagon full of cabbage after the main cabbage picking season. And the farmer was taking those heads of cabbage and he was running it through what looked like a silo filler. Now, if you know what a silo filler is.
Oh,
blows it in.
It's a machine that chops up the corn and blows it up into silos. Okay? And so it was shredding these heads of cabbage. Okay? And then I saw way out in the field a whole herd of beef cattle that were just going to town munching away. So they were spreading the cabbage and feeding it as fodder for the beef cattle.
Father, don't
So, you know, what an outstanding idea. I never thought of it in that way, but, you know, it's perfect. So when you buy some of those cows, it's already, you already have the sauerkraut and cabbage. The sauerkraut and beef, it's all right there right away. And spare ribs, you know. Okay,
That's how Ruth met Boaz.
yeah, leading the.
Ruth
Right.
was a foreigner.
Yeah.
Excuse me, it's rather interesting, Father,
Yeah.
that in today's agriculture, we strip everything to the fence line. We don't leave anything for the cabbage or the grapes or the things of that nature. And my wife, who is a farm girl, finds that extremely disturbing.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take
Well,
care of
there-
wildlife.
And it doesn't, you know, go with these laws that that Moses laid down for the Hebrew people. Except today, you know, so much corn is left over and not picked and so on, and, you know, the deer herd and the wildlife are gonna have good feeding, all winter long, it seems. Okay, the other important thing is, verse 4, I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but do not turn aside to idols or make molten gods for yourself. I, the Lord, am your God. You'd think that would have been first, but it wasn't. Here in this section, and it's getting that across. Now, it just so happened, you know, as I was preparing this, I came across on YouTube all kinds of YouTube things about cutting down Catholics. It seems like they always cut down Catholics, but not Eastern Orthodox for our statues and icons and so on. So ancient Near Eastern cultures, let me give you an insight into this. So ancient idol worship, here's where the difference was. They believed, the ancient Near Eastern cultures, the pagan cultures, believed that their statues had magical or mystical power. If you broke the statues, if they were destroyed in some way, then you were like cutting off your God, you know, from your God, your connection with God, and God would be, you know, really offended, and basically you took away the power that was present when you brought a molten image into your home. Okay? So, that's why, for instance, if you read carefully in the prophets, most of the prophets came about after most of the tribes of Israel, the northern tribes, began to intermarry with the Canaanites. And when they did, those wives would bring into their homes their little statues and their God, their tokens and totems and so on. Put them up on a shelf somewhere in their homes. And that was the great, you know, reason why, justification for the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel by the Assyrians in the latter part of the 700s, because of the intermarriage and that they were falling away, those who were Hebrew people were falling away from the one true God and worshiping these idols and totems and so on. Now, so let's make something clear. We as Roman Catholics, number one, we don't believe statues have magical or mystical powers. Do we?
No.
Oh, we buried Joseph to sell a house.
That's superstition, that's.
It didn't work.
Yeah. Number two, Catholics do not worship statues. Do we?
No.
Okay, we reverence, right?
Right.
There's a difference. Okay? We reverence. Number three, praying to saints. We would be criticized. Why don't you pray to God and to Jesus? You pray to, you Catholics pray to saints. Ever hear that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, now one way to understand that is, at the end of the creed that's used in many Protestant churches as well, we believe in the communion of saints. So, we too are part of the mystical body of Christ. Those who have gone before us marked with the sign of faith, as the book of Revelation says, right? So we see it as the mystical body of Christ. It's just like during our own lifetime we ask people to pray for us. So after they've died and they've gone to God, we pray for them. We ask them to pray for them, to intercede for us, right?
Right.
What's the difference?
None.
No, for us as Catholics, it's not. It's an indication of our reverence, right? And our need to intercede and have help with our prayers through the intercession, all right? And around here, anyhow, in northeastern Wisconsin, you can always say, well, how about secular culture? Those who go to Lambeau Field, and you got a big statue of Curly Lambeau and Lombardi up there. Isn't that idol worship?
Sort of.
Isn't that cultic idol worship? You stand in front of it and you get your picture taken with Lombardi pointing. Where the heck is he pointing anyhow? He's pointing to where the old stockyards were. Green Bay Packaging Company, where they still kill cows and make meat. Isn't that where he's pointing? I don't know. Okay. So, I mean, that's more idol worship than what we do with our statues and saints, right? Now I just gave you something good to use, right? If anyone confronts you.
Father, what was number?
What was number one? Number one, Catholics do not believe statues have a magical or mystical power. Except Deacon Morey, who buys St. Joseph statues whenever his family wants to sell a house. Okay, there's just a few more things here in chapter 19, but I don't want to go through it. We'll pick this up next week, okay? So I hope you discovered something along the way. I'm trying to make applications as much as possible. Thank you very much for coming.